Welcome to Koffee Talks, a Pokémon card collecting podcast, featuring David Person, owner of the world's most complete English Pokémon card collection, and Dan Norton, a longtime collector with all the knowledge behind the cards.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to Coffee Talks with me, Dan, and of course, David. David, you're wanting to do something a little bit different this week, bit of a special episode, I guess, kind of because of how soon since the last video we're recording this one, we're a bit off on our schedule, so why don't you tell the people what you've got planned for today?
Dan, I'd like to keep it a secret. I'm not going to say anything. So I think we should just move on, and you and I'll both find out and say, no, Dan, I can't keep it a secret. I don't like to keep secrets, Dan. I'm really transparent, but let us talk about, let us do something today, Dan. We should do something for the folks out there. So here's what's happening. This is going to be called our first Coffee Talks special edition podcast. And the topic is dealing with grading your card controversies. Oh, controversies. This way everybody might watch. Okay, so I want to talk about why we're doing this. All right. So first I'll say that I shirked my responsibility to Dan this week because I've been sick for like a whole week. Unfortunately, bad lungs are a precursor for accelerated health declines when it comes to any illness you pick up these days. So I've not had the energy to prepare our usual formatted podcast. But I do want to get something out. And so we've decided to make it more simple in the sense that we're going to cover one topic in a much more serious way. I think it's a very relevant topic. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, find it informative. And the second part of this is because it's been in all of the video controversies these days. Should you grade? How bad is grading? All of this stuff that's going on, which the question is, should you be grading your cards anymore at all? That's what, to me, this all boils down to. So let me talk about what this episode is and is not. It is not an episode about how to get your cards graded. Not going to talk about how you package them, how do you send them, how do you insure them, how much does it cost, should you send them to a middleman. It's also not intended to be a specific recommendation for certain grading card companies to use, although we hope that in the future we'll have a guest on that may help us navigate all of these topics, depending on how this video goes and what your feedback is, okay? So once again, this video is, should you even grade your cards anymore at all? Okay. I do want to apologize again to Dan for not getting out sooner, for not being here sooner. Dan, sorry. Number two, I do want to say that Dan doesn't know what's coming. So Dan is basically the viewer, the watcher. He never knows what's coming with me anyways. You guys know that. So, but he's going to be here as the person kind of listening and talking back to me and giving me other feedback, whatever. But this is kind of just my spur of the moment in my head stuff that we want to get out there because it's all just what everybody's talking about. Okay, a quick administrative note before we dive right in because got a lot of content. For those who entered the giveaway from last podcast, you will be notified of the winner during our next regular edition Coffee Talks podcast. And as of today, you should realize I'm not allowing anyone else to enter that drawing. If you've entered, then you're in. This way, it doesn't decrease your chances of winning by further people being able to enter the drawing for the previous podcast. But I am going to offer a new giveaway specifically for this podcast for a new group of participants to also be announced during our next Coffee Talks normal episode. So please listen intently for that information sometime during this discussion, and then leave a comment on the video like you guys know to do. Do not leave the requested information, along with reaching out to me on my Instagram at dperson1 and messaging with the specific information you will hear later. All right. Finally, one more apology for not having all of our normal segments. We're not doing the deal of the day or trainer A or deck or B. And so it's good for Dan. It's not fair. I put Dan under that microscope so much that, you know what, he's actually had to find therapy for that specific segment. And I know what it is because everyone in my family is doing therapy now just because I'm a part of their family. So, Dan, are you ready for this? Are you ready for this ride of a grading lifetime as we just get set to jump in here?
I think so. We'll find out what it is once you get going.
Okay. I'll take a sip of my tea then, Dan, because I don't even know what's going to happen here either. So let's jump right in. Recent hobby videos have addressed a myriad of grading company issues. And let's talk about what some of those could be or are. Number one, overgrading. I call it overgrading, giving cards better numbers than they actually deserve. Of course, that could be deliberate or just negligent in the way the employee's doing the work. Inconsistent grading, not only from one day to another, but from olden days, vintage to today. Companies doing different ways of grading, different ways of evaluating the cards, different standards that may have developed even within their own company. Who is doing the actual grading? Are they sufficiently trained or experienced and receiving enough compensation to justify their importance in the hobby's food chain, so to speak? This concept of pop preservation, which I've only recently learned about, this idea that there's a speculation out there that some companies, I've heard PSA, but I'm not really looking to name companies today specifically, but are saying, hey, we're going to grade tougher to make sure that certain cards only have a certain number of 10s because there shouldn't be that many 10s and they should be whatever it is, whatever the numbers are, there's realization of certain condition issues with certain cards. Maybe they were overgraded before and they don't want to be overgraded again. I don't know. Dan, if you want to jot any notes or you want to say anything about this, I'm going to finish the list and let you jump in a minute if you have other issues or things that are on your mind too. Preferential grading treatment for bigger sellers or hobby influencers, either in gaining access to more experienced graders, receiving the grades they get from whoever grades the cards, or better grading prices. Inside information for certain folks on coming grading card company policy changes. Grading sealed items as authentic or just based on appearance and not what's inside. So an example of that would be certain grading card companies will grade the booster packs. They have no idea what's inside. They are grading them. They're not grading heavy or light. They're just grading because the pack looks nice. Could be the same thing with a cello wrapped piece of a card, like the one I bought recently from, I don't know, Dan will tell you, Norway, Australia, somewhere across the world. And we've now talked about in our future podcasts or previous podcasts, but future to those developments, that those sealed cards and stuff sometimes can be resealed. But once they get in the slab, does anybody really know if anything inside is of any value? That's really the point I'm making here. Using the same or similar cert numbers for Pokemon and other types of cards like sports, which can cause confusion if mixed up in the grading card company output deliveries, etc. Okay, these are just little things that there's been videos on recently. And in the past, there's certainly always been concerns about breaking slabs open and resubmitting cards to the same or multiple different card companies until the grade finally comes back at whatever the heck the desired number is. And Dan will mention this in a second, talking about, I think it was the Logan Paul illustrator or something.
Yeah.
Finally, in addition, in the past, folks have tested all major grading card companies. There's been videos done on this and all kinds of stuff where they've been able to demonstrate conclusively that they can get fakes or proxy cards through each of them as authentic. Okay. So, Dan, before I go on past this, and I guess I'll just, one more little paragraph and then you're going to weigh in. I know that Dan's going to weigh in here, and many of you will be able to weigh in on many other instances or concerns that you are aware of with grading card companies. I really want to see them in the comments. We hope this will be a continuing dialogue and maybe a part 2 of the special edition on grading with Koffee Talks. There's simply no way I can cover in just a span of a small video all of the different controversies and concerns and issues and lack of confidence that people have in grading card companies for different issues. So please do put in the comments anything else you think we should be listing here. All right, Dan, what else comes to mind? Does anything come to mind?
I think the only thing that comes to mind that you didn't mention, which is an ongoing thing which gets mentioned a lot, is grading companies damaging people's cards when they're sent in. You send in a card that could be 9 or 10 quality, the grading card company damages it themselves, it comes back a 6, and then you see obviously people having to fight to try and prove that it was damaged at the grading card company. That's the other one that I see quite often going round in YouTube videos and stuff.
Okay. Okay. And that makes a lot of sense too. That definitely has come up here as well. I think I may have missed one that I wanted to say because this one's kind of front and center right now. I think I missed this. So being able to open and reseal certain slabs, also allowing for the possible insertion of different cards which don't meet the original grading standard. Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, so what I want to say about that is I'm going to liken that, and you'll see why when we get to this video a little bit more. I'm going to liken that to a defect in a car, like a car recall. When something is wrong and something has to be recalled, and you have to take your car in and make sure that the thing doesn't fall apart, or the steering wheel doesn't all of a sudden steer to too much to the left. So this whole concept of resealing, it's not a deliberate thing that a company is doing in the sense of that the slab is more easily opened up. It's in a sense a defect. And I would argue that what Dan just stated is also another form of a defect in the sense of it's in the procedural defect. If they're damaging and they're hurting cards and whatever, and that is something that happens even not only just in how they're handling them, but also in the transportation back and forth or whatever. I've seen some videos on that. That's essentially a company defect of some manufacturing or process or handling. They don't manufacture, but the idea being that there should be more quality control in the process all the way along from beginning to end in how they handle cards. Okay. You'll see why that's relevant in a bit as well. All right. So these are some concerns. I'm going to bring up just one quick point that I was thinking about when I was not adding to the list anymore. And this has to do with authentication. So most of you know that when there was a large hobby dealer who was recently involved in a deal with Logan Paul when he agreed, I guess, and again, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but to authenticate the hobby dealer a sealed Series 1 base booster box for, what am I saying, Series 1?
It was a first edition. It was a case. It wasn't just a booster box. So it wasn't that you could actually see the box. It was a sealed, like the brown cardboard box that you get 6 booster boxes in. And I believe it was authenticated long before Logan Paul got involved with the deal, as far as I know. Logan bought it because it was an authenticated case. But this grading company or authentication company, they had authenticated it. They put like a special wrap on it, which was basically the same way that you see like a booster box that's sealed in the cellophane wrap. They sealed the case in their own wrap to say that we've authenticated this. But I believe that was an owner or two ago that was all done and dealt with, and it was already fully authenticated before Logan got involved to buy it.
Okay, so a couple things here then. Number one, for me, I'm up early in the morning. I'm not going to tell you what time it is because it could be 2 PM, and that's not relevant. That's none of your guys' business. Okay, maybe some days I just want to wake up a little later. But I really didn't do that today because I felt so bad since it's been like down 6 or 7 days of illness and we're so far past, and Stephen Kassoon is, dying out there. I don't blame the poor kid. So the thing is, your average player is as well, by the way. Very kind people that are begging us to put our stuff out there, and a lot of you do, and so thank you. But I'm exhausted. Let's not lie about it. I haven't slept because, you're coughing up a lung or something. And so, sometimes I'm just going to be puttering around today. Give a guy a break, okay? Let's say I had died, here's the mortality piece, during the week. We wouldn't have a podcast right now. So if I putter around a little bit and Dan hasn't dyed his hair yet, leave us alone. Learn something, feel good about it. Don't learn anything, we don't care. Okay, good stuff, Dan. Thank you. So Dan will correct me as I sleep through the thing, which is why you never see me with a cup of tea on here. I think there's a picture and here's a tea. I'm going to have some. All right, so with that brief introduction, let me ask you again. Is there any reason to grade your cards in the current controversial market environment? Current, previous, whatever. Let me state for the record, for those of you that may not know, especially because we've got some kind new people on the podcast, and that's really nice. 98% of my personal collection has not been graded, although I'm still very picky about the condition. It doesn't mean I haven't gone through 3 and 4 sets to build a near mint or actually very close to mint set when I'm building one. But this is just me and my personal preferences. And yet it amazes me, never ceases to amaze me, how many people look at my card posts and say, they'll see a trophy card and they'll say, you need to grade that card. Why? Why do I need to grade that car? So let's pick a starting point with the lay of the land in the YouTube world, where the great majority of these so-called exposing the horrors of the grading card company videos are viewed. Sure, there can be several thousand views of any one of these videos. Dan, I'd like to ask you at this point, why can't we get several thousand views of any of our videos?
They're going up. We got a few thousand on some of them.
You're the best.
It is also, man. I do want to say at this point, when we're talking about like the YouTube videos that happen because of these things, obviously there are real issues with grading companies. We're going to cover some of those today. A lot of the YouTube videos that people make on them are blowing stuff out of proportion. They are overhyping it. It's making drama for the sake of making drama sometimes. So we're going to talk about issues that grading card companies have, but make sure you're not just taking everything at face value when you're watching these 10-minute videos called CGC is burning the hobby to the ground, PSA ruined my cards, Beckett is taking bribes from Vladimir Putin, or whatever people are titling their videos to get you to watch them, and then it's 10 minutes of rambling about nothing. Just make sure you're still thinking about everything with a critical eye. You're trying to figure out what people's motivations are. When people are making these videos, what's their motivation? If someone's making 100 videos about why CGC are bad, are they doing it because they actually think CGC are bad, or are they doing it because they're invested in PSA? Same goes the other way. Are they making videos about how PSA are bad because they're invested in CGC, or Beckett, or Ace, or any other grading company? There's lots of grading companies out there. So think critically about everything you hear about grading companies. And you know what? That is going to include what me and David say today. Do bear in mind, me and David are people who choose not to grade the vast majority of our collections. We're going to try and talk as much as we can without biases, but we're always going to have inherent biases, and a lot of people are, so make sure you view everything critically. That just goes for life, but no one does it anyway. So it's a pointless thing for me to say.
So Dan, that's so good that you said that. First of all, it made me smile. Number two, it actually made me sit up and wake up a little bit. And number three, it was exactly what I was going to say right now. And again, you guys, Dan hasn't heard this, so we're just having a conversation as he's sort of listening to my opinions and commenting on this stuff, which is why this is a video that should really generate a lot of comments, because I expect a lot of you guys have comments on it as well. So I talk about the videos, Dan did as well, and they may amass several thousand views. But what I want you to realize is that those number of views pale in comparison to the number of buyers on eBay or Facebook or wherever, meaning the vast majority of folks involved in this hobby have no idea of all of this video drama. And like Dan said, many of them, even if they do, can read right through it. The vast majority of folks in the hobby only know raw or graded. That's how they look at it, and are actually often, especially when the newer ones, looking for advice on which company to lean towards if their preference is for graded. But let's interject another reality check here regarding most, if not all, of the sordid things going on at the various grading card companies, because we all know they're horrifically bad. I kid. They are the same things going on in every other field and aspect of American business today. Okay? Doesn't everyone know? Dan, don't cringe because you don't know where I'm going yet.
I didn't cringe. I was nodding. I'm agreeing with you.
I don't mean that. I mean you're about to cringe when I start the next part.
Okay.
Doesn't everyone know that Donald Trump has used his money, power, and access for his own personal benefit for years? Heck, he'll be the first to tell you he just uses the system in the way he best sees fit. If that means paying no taxes or tying litigation up for years, that's just how the system works. And half this country looks past all of Trump's activities because they agree with him or because there's nothing they can do about it. They're not a lot of the stuff Trump's doing you might say it's immoral, unethical, but it's not necessarily illegal. So if you don't pay taxes because there's tax laws that say you don't pay taxes, and you can get away with it and figure out how to configure your stuff, one could argue that's an okay use of the system. I'm not arguing that. I'm just giving you some points. But is it fair that Trump can use his money, power, and influence to get favors or be privy to inside information? Well, clearly, one could argue it's not illegal, but is it immoral? And please understand, I'm only using Donald Trump as an example here because of his visibility and not for any political discourse purposes. Don't care. It's not a political discussion. So is it fair that Trump has amassed a network of contacts from which he reaps substantial benefits not available to you and me? Well, how about we forget Trump for a minute? Talk about my 88-year-old mom, my little old mom. Is it fair that my mom can wield her influence to gain benefits that I can't? What do I mean? Well, I mean when she goes to the casino, they comp her, give her bonus play money, feed her up the wazoo. She doesn't eat that much anymore when you're a smaller woman. She's too busy making money at the slot machine. I put that in there because she'll love it when she hears it. And they take her back and forth, personally transport her 30 minutes to and from the casino. Pretty nice gig, right? She spends to earn those comps, whether you think that's right or not. How about when you go to the restaurant and you slip the maitre d' some money to bypass the reservation line? You haven't been able to get a reservation for weeks. $100, you're in. Is it not okay? Or is it okay? Or should you even care in the first place? Come on, guys. If you've got money or friends in the right places, you fly in corporate jets, you attend sporting events in corporate suites, you mingle with company board members, and you get the inside scoop on most everything. American business, worldwide business today. In addition, in every industry in this country, if not the world, bigger purchasers get better prices and access to more people and perks. So why should any of us listen to or worry about all the pettiness of the YouTubers and their seemingly amazingly revealing grading card company horror videos at all? Frankly, I don't think we should. Dan, I have a lot more coming here, so you don't have to interject at any point, because I might be reading for hours and we only have 2. But please, would you like to weigh in on anything there?
Well, I also just want to add as well, I think a lot of the time when the YouTubers are making these videos and you're saying, do we just need to ignore their points? Half of the YouTubers probably don't even believe their own points. We've talked before about how once your YouTube channel goes down the drama line and you build up your audience based on drama, you need to find drama every week. So, yeah, the YouTubers themselves probably don't even believe it. So, if they don't believe it, you shouldn't believe it too. But I'm going to let you continue with your possibly political-based rant. We don't know how far that's going, so continue on.
No, and not political at all. We're done with that. So just as I was just trying to, to give a kind of a reality check to what's going on, even in our whole country. Half the country honestly thinks that what Donald Trump does is fine. And so I'm not one to criticize anything. I want people to believe whatever they want. I'm just saying that if you've got enough gray area out there, gosh, there should be plenty of gray area in a small hobby called Pokemon. But it's so interesting when you talk about the number of views, because you've got these negative influencers out there. And when I was just scanning the last couple of days, some of their view numbers, and when they're doing a dramatic video, it's 4,000. And when they do a streaming video for some reason on some product or whatever, it's 300 views. So it clearly makes a difference in how they're even incentivized to go ahead and do those additional dramatic videos. I will throw in a plug here for a friend of ours, Alex at Nostalgianomics. This is not intended to be, I wasn't going to throw it in, but just watch some fantastic stuff with that guy. He's very consistent in the way he handles his opinions, in his dissection of who are doing the right things and wrong things and who's being real and who's not. And so I think we need more people like that. Go watch Nostalgianomics videos, really interesting. And his videos are consistent no matter what he's talking about, because I think people really understand that what he's saying are reality-based comments, in your heart-held comments that allow for people to get a real consistent answer and not one more biased towards whatever the topic of the day needs to be. All right, now I need to talk about.
Just jump in real quick. I think you missed.
Don't stand. Don't jump in unless you want to.
Yeah, I think you missed an analogy somewhere, because you made the analogy of, Donald Trump being able to exploit these loopholes and stuff. And you said, yeah, you just mentioned Trump because of his visibility. But if you look at how people reacted to some of the things Trump did in office, again, not getting super political, there were so many people talking bad about it and just saying, oh, he shouldn't have done this. And some of those people were ignoring when Obama and Biden do very similar things. And then the other half of the people are saying, oh, well, we love Trump, but we hate when Obama and Biden do this. You can see compilations all the time of even news channels. You can look at like comparisons of Fox News against like CNN, how they can report the same story from two different presidents doing the same thing and report it so differently. And there's your analogy. That's your videos about these different grading card companies. It's, I've got the one I like, and I'm going to talk bad about the other one, even though my one does the same thing sometimes. I'm just going to ignore that. There's your analogy.
Well, and here's the thing, Dan. I wasn't intending to talk badly about Donald Trump, okay? I am not a political person. Whether or not I like him or don't, or want someone else or don't, it doesn't matter. I was talking about, I used him from a visibility standpoint.
I understand that. I'm just saying that we can pull that analogy to, I'm not saying anything specifically bad in this section about Obama or Trump or Biden. I'm just saying that is how people treat them, and people will ignore the bad things that their person is doing in order to talk bad about the things that the person that they don't like is doing. And that's exactly how we do see people treating these grading card companies.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying, that there can be many different people plugged into the piece of the pie, the piece of the equation. But the only word I'm not thrilled with what you're using, and I don't want to talk about my politics, but you keep saying doing bad things. And so what I'd like you to say instead is, it's no different talking about Biden or Obama using their political influence, using their position of power. That's what I would like you to say.
Sure.
That's what this discussion is about. That, oh, you know what, you don't understand. This guy had inside influence and insider information over to CGC. This person was able to get better grading and better money prices. Okay, and this is all, that's horrible, horrible, horrible. I'm saying it goes on everywhere and anywhere, and it's naive to not think it does. And I just was trying to say if it's being done with maybe the most powerful.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't trying to say that the things that they did while in office was in any way comparable to the grading card company. I was just using it as an analogy of how people treat them and how people will cherry pick what they care about if it goes for or against their favorites.
Okay.
But yeah, let's just move on and stop talking about any current or former presidents.
Good, because I won't be talking about any current or former ones. So let me talk about myself. That makes sense, because we don't talk about them. We're not talking about Dan. Let's talk about me.
All right.
Let me be the first to say, regardless of what you choose to believe about me, because I watch other videos where people say, oh, he's a this, he's a hypocrite, whatever. Not too many. Most people are very kind. I've seen a few negative comments. So I am not a person who hangs out with the rich or in the so-called right circles. I still work for a living. I support a wife and kids. I've never flown on a corporate jet. In fact, I've never even flown first class, 62 years, not once. But I'm also not some naive kid anymore. Someone who thinks we should all have the same access to everyone or everything just because. I've lived long enough to know that will just never be the case. I was writing that and I thought to myself, I was thinking about Hunger Games for a moment. Those pictures, terrible. I simply don't choose to waste my valuable time worrying about how others have it better than me when there's nothing that I can do. And let's also be real in acknowledging that Pokemon is not a kid's hobby anymore, meaning acting surprised and disgusted that certain things are happening is ridiculously naive. There are kids involved, of course, but the vast majority of folks, if you look at the demographics that view our podcast, a late 20, early 30-something gentleman, these are not kids anymore, okay? So I just want to throw out a few more quick examples of privileged access, things where in any field of business, you have attorneys and the services afforded you. Guess what? If you can get a great attorney, you might commit a horrible crime and get off because you paid him $500. It's a bad example an hour versus 100. You might get the public defender. You might be able to, get more people working on your case. It's just a function of money. It is what it is. Do you guys know what a doctor's concierge model is? Do you understand that today many, many doctors don't see people anymore? And the only way you can get to them is instead of you going through insurance, they make you pay them a single fee per year, $2,000 or $3,000. It's called a concierge model. And that allows you to have personal access to their iPhone and call them when you need to, or get things on a spur of the moment. And you actually, they take down the size of their practice by elevating it up in more of a prestige and a mystique kind of way. Most of you know, actually you wouldn't, I'm the only one that would know because I've got all the mental issues, that most therapists don't take insurance anymore. So what you deal with when it comes to finding a good therapist is, again, private payments. Can you find someone, or do you have the money to pay for that to help yourself? Again, money making a difference. How about nepotism? Kids getting into college or getting jobs through their parents, et cetera. Is that okay or not okay? Not commenting on okay or not okay, because I'm just a very liberal person who says, hey, figure it out for yourself, whatever works for you. But what I am saying is that in general, none of these things are illegal, even if you feel they are morally unfair. So is it worth being jealous of others who are able to avail themselves of some of these advantages? Or shouldn't your days be focused more on positive aspects and living the best life you can? From my heart, as your friend and someone who really cares, Alex says that, how do you look at a person? Are they the same in front and behind the camera? I don't care what people say. They say mostly nice things. I'm the same, never change, don't care. So when I say from my heart as your friend, it's not some facade. It's me giving you the best advice I can give. I truly encourage you not to judge, not to care, not to blame, and maybe not to even listen to all the negativity. It's all stress-inducing and can lead you to feeling like you're a victim of a system that doesn't basically help and support you. Instead, and I know this sounds quaint, just do you and don't worry about what you can't control. Instead, continue to hustle down whatever it is you like to make happen for yourself. Because in the end, working hard and surrounding yourself with positivity will most assuredly elevate you to whatever excess in the hobby and hopefully in life you'd like to achieve. And always remember, little old Uncle Dave is only one message away from a response to any questions or concerns or issues you might have in helping you achieve your goals. I'm going to go to my bottom line on this section, but Dan, anything before I hit that bottom line?
No, because we're already 30 minutes in and we've barely touched on actual grading issues. We're just talking analogies. So hit your bottom line, finish this section off, and then we'll jump into some issues and stuff.
Okay. I mean, Dan, I don't think you know where I'm going with this video, because if you think there's more...
Not a clue.
Yeah, this is the video. The video is the question I asked, okay? Is it worth grading your cards anymore? And I'm giving you guys the precursors for all of the controversy that might say to you, okay, let me give you the bottom line, and then I'll answer what Dan said. So my bottom line here is, isn't this all just a jealousy thing? Jealousy from folks not having the access or contacts of the bigger players, envy over other folks who have more views or followers or a more valuable collection. Isn't this about folks either wishing they can control issues which they simply can't, or looking for views, or a combination of both? That's the bottom line. Now, before I go to the next section, I want to go back. So what have I said? I've said there's lots of issues with grading card companies that have been brought up in some public forum to some degree. Are they even reaching a great deal of the public? Are they really significant? Are they minuscule? Nothing at all? And do you feel that those issues are significant enough or insignificant enough that they affect grading and your decisions around whether or not you want to grade your cards? And in addition, Dan and I have both pointed out the problems with these video YouTuber influencers and the negativity. And not that some of what they say isn't correct, but are they blowing it out of proportion for views? And should it change your opinion or not on grading in whatever you choose to do? Because you think it's affecting the markets now, it's going to affect the markets tomorrow or into the future. That's kind of the baseline. But I've got a lot more to say about this as you're generally sitting there trying to formulate your own opinion, which I'll get to my opinion, of whether or not you should grade your cards at all. That's what we're talking about, Dan. Gosh, I thought I was the one sleeping through this. Do you get it or not? Because I can cut this whole thing right now.
I'm sort of following what you're saying. I just didn't know the list of issues you put at the start. I didn't know if we were going to hit those one by one and go a bit more in depth on them or not.
Yes, we are not going to hit them again. They're sort of a laundry list that I want other people to add to. Because you know what? What if one of our viewers says, I can come up with 10 other issues, David, and I want him in the comments to say, there is so much more of reasons not to grade because grading card companies are horrific or whatever, if that's the conclusion that they inevitably were to draw. You don't know my conclusions yet, so you guys don't know where I'm going, but you should know me well enough by now that no matter what advice I give, we always say, form your own opinions using objective information, a plethora of information, and you'll do the right things. So I am trying to present an objective viewpoint of issues, concerns, and non-concerns that are the hobby is essentially dealing with regarding grading cards right now. All right, I'm going to move on. Okay. Let's all realize that grading card companies are for-profit entities, many of which are publicly traded. And while they have to balance negative press with, and so the negative press, let me tell you what that would be. That's in my field, that's called ESG, investing issues, like environmental, social, and governance issues that are supposed to be about doing good. So there's some people that will only invest in ESG type stocks that they're not worried about bad press coming out. They have to balance negative press around those issues with profits. The stark reality is the individual collector, seller, or investor is way too small to make a difference. If there is an identified problem or controversy, it typically is on such a relatively minor scale that it can easily be ignored, swept under the rug, or just dealt with on an individual customer make whole type of basis. So as long as the company can assert it's doing its best and there are no deliberate attempt at fraudulent activity, typically the issue quickly fades away. Especially in this day and age of rapidly decreasing social media attention spans, where something's big one day and it's not the next, there is simply not enough overall harm to gain real newsworthy attention. And I would argue here, for example, look at the fact that there's been stuff recently about, oh my goodness, we figured out that we could open up with 7 hours of effort, we can open up CGC slabs. And we can take the cards out and put a new card in, and then somebody's going to get something that's listed as a 10 that's really a 2. So it's not a big enough issue, folks, because it's just like that product recall I said, that they can fix it and they can offer some to make whole process, or it's not a big enough issue because not everybody's going to spend 7 hours to try to undo one and grab the bottom thing off the car, so they've got to go and fix it again. Doesn't matter. So David, aren't you then implying there's no real harm in grading your cards? Well, maybe. But maybe the focus shouldn't be on the word harm. We are all aware of how rapidly the pace of technological change in every area of life is accelerating. This is especially true for the use of automation and artificial intelligence in almost all production and service-related businesses. I know of at least 2 grading card companies, I know there's probably more for sure, already using machines and AI to grade cards, which if employed properly, at least gives the confidence of consistency and objectivity versus inconsistency and subjectivity in the grading process as it currently stands. And just one quick caveat here, and it's important. My one concern about AI grading is if it's too specific and too harsh without proper deficiency allowances built in, it may scare folks into hoping for better grades with a technically less accurate process grader or company. So if this becomes the case, it's going to take longer for the hobby to eventually adopt these newer, more accurate grading standards, because people will say, well, they're great, but they're always going to give me a 6, and I don't want to see a 6 because any other company would bring a 7. But I think the AI companies realize this and are planning accordingly on how to shift their grading scales along with how precise their machinery is. All right? So just a quick digression back to the main topic. When we look back 5 or 10 years from now, folks, and listen closely, when newer technologies have been tested, proven, and widely adopted, I'm not doing it. It's adopted, okay? and I promise you they will be, is that grade of 10 or any number today going to hold any weight at all? Or are new buyers going to be requesting that sellers break open every single old slab for a fresh and more accurate or more generally accepted new grading standard widely offered at that point in time? Are you prepared to accept the reality you may have to pay all over again to have your cards upgraded to the latest generally accepted grading standards? Okay. So let me pause for a second before I go on with this. What I'm going to say here is this is happening and this is going to happen. We are in the throes of this. When I am a financial advisor, a wealth management investment advisor for clients, and it requires me to not only manage their money, but also to do their financial planning. Let's put aside the financial planning for a moment and talk about managing money. When you're managing someone's money, you have to understand the portfolio managers who are handling the money or the individual stocks you're purchasing. And when I do many conferences and research, if you understood that the cycle of, used to be like, I'll give you examples. I don't store the stuff in my head because I'm more concerned with a major point of how the pace of technological change is accelerating. There was the television or whatever, and it took them some amount of years, 60 years to develop it, or it was relevant for 60 years. And then all of a sudden there's the phone, and now there's AI. And the phone, was created in 15 or 20 years. And now AI is 5 years. And now they're talking about AI taking over the world, and possibly our government is an AI-based thing where we can't even walk out of our houses. That might be a bit far. So what I'm saying is this is happening. And I have had so many people I haven't had. A bunch of you are listening and saying, David, you're off your rocker. My PSA 10 will always be a PSA 10. It will always hold its value. Well, folks, people are going to start looking into those cases. And it's not going to be, it's just a 10. Not going to work like that, especially because you've got so many millennials, new people coming into this hobby that are basically much more aware of what technology can do. And as these new grading card companies tout their talents and their developments and their patents and everything, they're going to gain much more traction by people who really want to know their stuff is more accurate. Now, I am not speaking up. I am not giving you a commercial for artificial intelligence grading card companies, because what I'm essentially saying is the next 5 or 10 years, there could be 10 of them. I don't know. So I am saying that I'm sure a lot of these other companies, PSA, CGC, Beckett, probably working on their own models to employ that stuff as well. If they're not, they'd be crazy. Okay. It wouldn't be good business not to be having something like that going on in the back boardrooms right now. But what I am saying is, one of the reasons you might choose not to grade right now is the fact that you could end up in a very short period of time regretting it, from the standpoint that now everybody's saying there was a period in the dinosaur age of grading when we could not decipher what the heck was a 9 or 10 or an 8 or 4. Can you believe that? Can you believe we lived through those days? Now we have machines that tell us exactly, and everybody agrees with it. And everybody's breaking open their slabs because no one will buy a card that's not in the same consistent grading thing of everyone else. And maybe I don't want to say no one, because then Dan will jump on me. How about if I say the majority of people possibly not willing to, go back and use the old standards because they know potentially it's going to make their cards worth less while everybody's adopting a newer standard. All right.
I do have something I want to say on that. It was a thing you said about a minute or so ago. You said we're going to get these new and upgraded grading companies. If we get this AI stuff, that's a thing going to be used by people who really want to know the condition of their cards. But I think we have to look at the people who are grading now. What percentage of them are doing it because they actually care about the condition of their cards, and how many of them are doing it because they want to raise the value of their cards? I think it skews very, very heavily in people are grading because they've been fed this idea that, if you get the 10, if you get this higher grade, it's going to increase the value of your cards. So I think there are more people who are doing it because they don't actually care what the condition of the card is. They want that number on the slab to increase the value. If they send it in to, say, PSA, generally prices on PSA stuff for normal level cards, like obviously excluding trophies and stuff, generally it's about an 8. A PSA 8 is about the same as a raw card. That's generally where it's been. 9 is a bit higher, then 10 is quite a bit of a jump. I don't think there are people, a lot of, well, obviously not no one, but I think a lot of the people grading aren't grading because they really want to know the condition of the cards. I think they're grading because they want that 9 or 10, because they want to increase the value, because they're using this as an investment or flipping or just trying to make money off it. So I think unless we have a huge shift from those kind of people to the people who really actually want to know the grade of their card, then I think people will be a lot more resistant to AI, because AI-style grading will point out all of the flaws in their card, will mark them down for this stuff, and I don't actually think people want to know the flaws in this card. They want a company to tell them their card is perfect so that they can get this increased sale price or this increased value of their collection.
Yeah, so very good points, Dan. I mean, let me respond to to a couple of them, or a couple comments or responses. The first one is, it is important, and I alluded to it, that AI type companies are going to have to scale accordingly. So they're going to have to identify that, even 10 flaws, because they're all machine precise down to the 1/1000th of a whatever, they're going to have to, that might still be a 9 or 10. So that is an issue I know they are working on now. And if you knew that was the case, and if you knew you wouldn't be overly penalized by just the sheer number of identified flaws, and you get a couple of big influencers saying, hey, this is really good stuff, I think it's going to shift the market dramatically. I really do. And I think that putting our heads in the sand, which is essentially what this argument is that you're making. And I'm not saying you're doing it. I'm just saying, when people say, well, I want to not know, and I just want to get a 9 or a 10, to me, that's a way of sort of putting your head in the sand and saying that your 9 or 10 will always hold up as a 9 or 10. We've already seen that 9s or 10s are not just taken at face. People now with high resolution scans are taking eBay listings and looking through them, saying there's no chance in heck that's a 9. That's a 7 or a 7.5 or 8. So, and if you think you're doing it, you think you're doing it because you're grading and you're getting a 9 because someone's going to buy it as a 9. If you're at some point, if you're going to do it as an investor, if some type of label of investment, which we're going to talk more about that in a moment, then at some point there has to be the ability to sell the card, whether or not it's your valuation of the card, to sell it later or to flip it tomorrow. And it's going to be the case right now that there's plenty of people who will accept it as a 9 right now. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. But I'm talking about down the road, and down the road when these standards are much more precise and people say, I'm tired of looking through eBay listings to have to navigate every white corner that I wasn't told about in a card that should be an 8 and it's listed as a 9.5 or 9 or whatever because, some grading card company got it wrong or deliberately graded it incorrectly, whatever you want to say. These greater technological capabilities are going to shore up those holes very quickly. And it's not going to take a lot of time, Dan. It's the telephone, it's the TV, the telephone, Oculus glasses. It's, you can see through your glasses now and covertly record people. It's just going to happen under our feet because everything is moving so quickly. Okay. So more, and this will dovetail into things you were talking about, Dan. Another side note here, you can already see glimmers of this with the Tag company, the Tag grading card company. I don't know them very well. I did a little bit of a mention of them on a video before. Just so you know, they don't even touch your cards. Your cards never get touched by human hands. They basically, however it is when machines open them and they're put in, I don't know that they don't actually get touched for 1 second to be stuck on let's say a plate of some kind, but machines do everything. They are not, once they're in the machine, they're never handled again. It's all evaluated, flipped, turned, slabbed, everything without even being touched. So, or even, that's one, I'm calling it machines do everything, or even a bit of a precursor to all that is coming is CGC's ability to use forensic technology to help authenticate older items, like my pre-release Raichu card. My point again here being, if you don't think this stuff is really coming, you do need to pull your head out of the sand, because you're very, very wrong. Okay, it's just a matter of how impactful it will or won't be. So, one final time, I'm going to ask again. Is there any reason to grade your cards at all? And now I'm going to give you my best opinion in a very specific 3.5-part answer, that's specific for you, to the question I'm asking you. I'm going to start with collectors. I'm going to segregate into 3 categories of people who are involved in the hobby and whether or not you should grade your cards. And I'm going to start with collectors. And my opinion for collectors is you should absolutely not grade your cards. You should save the expense. You should save the storage. You should save the disappointment if they don't come back with numbers you know they should. You should save what Dan talked about, the potential for someone in the grading card company to handle the card and disrupt its condition in some way. And you should wait for the grading industry to continue to mature to a point where there is greater consistency and acceptance of objectivity in the process as driven by AI. I believe that I sit in a pretty good position having never graded 98% of my collection, because I believe whatever choice I make at this point will allow me to pick the very best technology to do it and feel good that it's all consistent across however I'm going to do it. And I haven't spent the money. I haven't wasted the money, at least not, it's not necessarily a waste, but I haven't not had the money to use for more card acquisition that I might have had I spent it on, what do I have, 30,000 cards or something? So I sort of continue to hold in my hand the possibilities for everything. Just because I haven't graded doesn't mean I won't grade or can't grade. But I haven't, and I feel like I still hold all of the possibilities in my hands. Let me stop there and let Dan weigh in on the first category, which I'm calling collectors. Dan.
So the only thing I'm going to say to that is I understand obviously where you're coming from with condition and everything, but you do have to take in, if we're just going to look at the other side, if we're just going to present both sides of the argument, there is the authentication of cards. Sure, when they put the number on them, I'm not even necessarily saying the slabs that just say authentic. I'm saying the implication is when you're grading these cards, if they're in a slab from a company, that company is saying they're authentic. And ideal world, with what these companies actually say they do, if it then turns out that the card is not authentic, the company is then on the hook for that. The money that you spent on that card, PSA and I believe Beckett and CGC have a similar thing within their terms and conditions, where if you buy a graded card that hasn't been tampered with, where the slab hasn't been tampered with, and it does turn out to be fake, they're on the hook for the money. You will get your money back from that. But obviously, we've seen that that's not always the case. If they have made a mistake, do they always own up to it? Will they always actually do those payouts? We don't know. But I think there is at least something for collectors to consider about the idea, if you're buying a card, having more confidence in the card's authenticity, even if it's not the actual number grade you're trusting. Because obviously we've talked about AI having better looks at the condition, but the authentication issue is still a thing. You can still trust PSA, Beckett, CGC on 99.9% of occasions. They're going to get it right with authenticating, and theoretically, if they got it wrong with authenticating it, you have a recourse to get your money back.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I understand that concept. So I have a couple of things to say on that. Number one is, and I couldn't hear everything you said because wonderful technology that I always have on my end is not fair. But so if I repeat to the audience, I'm apologizing in advance. I honestly couldn't hear everything Dan said, but I got a gist of it. So number one, machines will easily be able to authenticate even better than anyone looking at the card. Okay. I don't want to talk about the fact, I don't put down, there are some folks out there that are constantly putting down the graders. They're, I don't want to say names. It's not worth watching their stuff. But you do have a lot of folks who don't have a tremendous amount of experience, that are doing grading, authenticating. And unless you actually put it in a machine that can look at the composition of the card and the percentage of the hollow and the percentage of chemicals used, all of that's going to be possible in the AI grading stuff. And it's just, again, I feel like I'm sitting here selling AI, but I'm not. I just know what's coming in the world because it's, how can you say, well, you can, you're always going to have issues. There's driverless cars, right? Because of AI. Well, some of those cars get in accidents. So it's not perfect. It's just saying that it is going to continue to get refined. So
I just want to clarify. I'm not saying that I don't think AI will be good at authenticating the cards. I'm not even saying that they're going to be the same or worse. I do believe that once that technology gets employed, it will be better than what we currently have. I'm just saying that right now, that option doesn't really exist. And you can't just say to collectors, don't buy any cards for the next 10 years and wait for this AI grading. You have to go with what we have now. And though the authentication and theoretical, refunds if something goes wrong is still an option, is still something you can take into consideration now when purchasing cards. Even if you fully go down the route of, I'm going to change those to an AI grading company later, you still have that option now. We have to look at what is available currently. And the authentication, I think, for collectors is the biggest plus for these grading companies right now.
All right, so I'm going to disagree, and I'm only going to. I don't want to firmly disagree. What I want to, I'm going to categorically disagree in the sense that you may be correct in the sense of a brand new novice collector, and even that I'm going to caveat, because the great majority of people in this hobby, even newer collectors, they develop a very rapid ability to view counterfeits from non-counterfeits. I'm not talking about grandma buying for grandson. I'm talking about actual people handling higher value cards, whatever. And there's not a ton of counterfeiting. There is, some, you look at the gray felt hat Van Gogh Pikachu, but again, such a high profile card. And the bulk of what people are putting in are not, $500,000 cards. They're still $20, $30, $40 cards. I don't think that your company, I don't think most people feel like they have to send it to the company to get it authenticated. I don't know what we're talking about. And if you're thinking, okay, more the $2,000 card they've never handled before. But in addition, even if that's the case, what I'm going to say, Dan, is you put that card in a holder case, and I don't care. I'm going to be doing the video. I'm going to be out there railing on the grading card companies, because how do you expect, if it's in the grading card case, and they authenticated it at the grading card company, and now you suspect it's not authentic, or you just believe it? So here's what happens. 3 years later, you figure out it's not authentic. Why? How did you figure that out? Because somebody held the case in their hand and showed you something that you didn't see. And so you just believe them, even though it's authenticated, or you now have the cojones to say, I'm going to pull it out of this case, but you can't pull it out because it still needs to be in the case for them to actually insure it and whatever. I think you're opening such a can of worms that they all say they insure, and they all say they authenticate, and they all say they're going to pay you if the value of the card, if it's not actually what they say it is, the grading card companies. But I just think that's a lot easier said than actually done.
It is. Like I say, we know that people have had issues claiming the money back. I guess when I'm talking about this for collectors, maybe I'm thinking more of the cards that they're buying, the options of buying already graded, as opposed to grading the stuff in their own collection. I suppose the argument I'm making there holds more weight on when you're actually buying stuff as opposed to grading your own cards.
Okay, so maybe I'm going to get to that in a minute. So I may get to that in a minute then as we go to another category. And there may be some overlap in how I call something. So please feel free to say, David, let's rephrase that to another category, okay?
Okay.
So in my opinion, and interestingly, Dan and I are both collectors, and I'm going to argue, just for argument's sake, that we do not grade our cards. Now, Dan has a few exceptions in there, like Vaporeons. We'll talk about that in a minute. But generally speaking, as collectors, we do not grade our cards. We try to find the conditions we're looking for, We try to find what fits, what makes us happy in our sets and holdings, and we go from that. But let's move to category number 2. Sellers. You're now a seller of individual cards, sets, whatever. Should you grade your cards anymore? And my answer is probably yes. So why? Probably, especially in the case, because of the novice buyers out there who, like all of us, are ripe for learning things the hard way. I call that paying your dues. And I realize what I just said doesn't sound great. So why did I say it? Because there's just so little trust in sellers these days, especially when it comes to selling raw cards in supposedly certain conditions, that these hobby newbies, and they're coming in every single day, more and more of them all over the place, put their complete faith in that slab. So to ensure as little financial business harm as possible, you likely have almost no choice but to grade before selling. Now, I'm not saying, again, on eBay, cards do sell and they do sell raw, but if you've got a really viable business where you don't want to deal with a bunch of hassles and you know that people don't really understand grading, slabbing takes away so much of those controversies because people believe it is what it is. And the newer people are as buyers, the more they still believe those slab numbers. The reality is most of these novices, when they get the card slab, whether via purchase or on their own, never again worry over its condition or authenticity. They could have anything, and I like to say, including an old slice of bologna in that holder, and they're never going to be concerned with breaking it out. Heck, you guys know my podcast partner, Dan Norton, who's actually voiced in the public that he gets his Vaporeon cards graded. If it says it's a 10, it's a 10. He could look at it 17 times over. He knows it's an 8.5, but he doesn't care because he loves that.
I've bought graded Vaporeons. I haven't gone out my way to send mine in for grading, trying to hit those 10s. I've just bought 10s in the past. And yes, I know that there are some that I have where... Like, I know that I have PSA 9 cards that are in better condition than some of those 10s that I have.
Yeah, and so, I mean, think about it, guys. If Dan knows that and he's sort of okay with that 10, and because it's a 10 and that's what it is, and maybe it didn't turn out to actually be a 10, you know, how many people really do rely or feel a confidence or a comfort with that slab? And so you as a seller, you almost have to do it just to create that comfort, especially, you know, we do have repeat customers, guys, but every day I've got new people coming to me and saying, you know, God, I'm looking for this, or this, or I'm brand new to the hobby. Help me out with advice. We know this hobby is continuing to grow, proliferate every single day. So now I'm going to add a little bit of controversy into this topic about slabbing cards in general, since we're talking about, okay, you probably should slab as a seller. Let me talk about one controversial topic, which I'll talk about as altering cards, improving cards, holdering cards. Put in any words you want. Is it okay to do it? Is it all right to improve a card? Okay, let me tell you what I mean. How about repaired or touched up cards that get into slabs, assuming it's an authentic card, it's not a fake, it's not a proxy, it's the actual card, and it's not cut to a smaller size. So that's going to be my two assumptions. Actual card, and not somebody didn't take a scissors or a guillotine cutter or whatever, and they didn't trim it to get those edges to be sharp. It's the actual card in its actual size. Is it okay if somebody repairs that card? If you had a chemical that could remove wear, if you could steam it out, there's no such thing, I don't think, to get rid of creases, and somebody took that card and basically upped its condition in some fashion, is that okay or is that not okay? Does it matter or should it matter to the owner once it's actually inside of a slab? I'm going to give you one quick example I'm aware of in the sports card world. I guess there was a Mickey mantle that years ago was touched up, and it was bought. It was one of the most expensive cards ever sold, and the buyer is one of the richest people in the world, and he was ecstatic to have the card. He knew it was real. He knew it wasn't trimmed. He knew it was touched up, and it was clean as a whistle. and he wanted to have that original card. He was happy with it. So what that tells you is we can at least say that not every single person in the world feels it's not okay to alter cards. We can't say everyone. We can say we know at least one. So I'm going to ask you guys, and I try to provoke thought. I don't have an agenda here, folks. You guys know me. I'm more liberal and accepting. Doesn't mean I think this is okay or not okay. I haven't really formulated an opinion. I'm just trying to create thought-provoking conversations that may lead this hobby to a better place. So I'll ask you guys, do you guys fix things in your lives? Do you improve things every single day? Just in your regular lives. Do you polish your shoes? Or when they run down? I know Dan and I don't wear those shoes anymore. Nobody wears polished shoes anymore. All you guys are sitting at home in your underwear. You don't put on dress shoes. You're working from home. The pandemic changed anything. Maybe I won't use the polished shoes example. I talked myself out of it. So do you let your shoes look like a bunch of whatever, or do you polish them up and make them look brand new? Do you pay a house cleaner to come and clean your house? I never did that until 2 years ago. My wife finally convinced me after 60 years. She said, it's me with you and housekeepers, or I'm out. So when you get a long-term marriage, you just start paying for the housekeepers. How about wiping cobwebs off the pictures in your house, or reframing an old picture to get the dirt outside of it? How about flattening an old photo that's it's curling in a book? Cleaning or detailing your car, stain removers off your clothing or your couches, sewing ripped draperies, cosmetic surgery for your face. Are these improvements? You know what? I guarantee you there's some people that think cosmetic surgery is wonderful and some that say you should never do it. You know, you look at Pamela Anderson right now. From my generation, you would understand her. You are younger folks that probably don't. She was the gal that was in the Baywatch series years ago, considered to be an iconic model.
Everyone knows who Pamela Anderson is.
Okay, good. So basically,
I've seen the metrics of the demographics of people who watch these videos. Everyone knows who Pamela Anderson is.
Okay, thank goodness. I'm not completely irrelevant in some of the stuff I cite. But, she's showing pictures these days of her as a 60-something wearing no makeup. She's almost unrecognizable. And she's saying, hey, I had to do all that for years. Things are different now. So what I'm saying is, if a card is authentic and can be made to be cleaned or in better condition, is there anything really wrong with that? Isn't beauty in the eyes of the beholder? And I have to tell you, as I said before, I don't have an answer for this. I've never personally altered a card, and I could insert the name of the person who's going to come after me and cut this video up, because that's what he does. I don't care what he does or says. He's the worst person in the hobby. And I wouldn't have the faintest idea of how to alter a card. I have probably one of the last 2 or 3 people in the entire world who's not weighed a Pokemon card pack. So I can see both sides of this argument, as long as this card is definitely, in my mind, authentic and has not been cut to a smaller than regular size. All right, Dan, your thoughts on, I'm just curious about a couple things.
So
part of my discussion was, I think you need to, this may have dovetailed into what you said earlier. I think you need to grade if you're selling, most likely have to grade these days. And I also think that that's a discussion and opinions around, is it okay to grade or alter a card?
Well, so I think when we get into it, one of the biggest problems that comes with altering cards is people altering cards and not being honest about the fact that they've altered them. And if we talk about, you mentioned, there's someone out there who's okay with altered cards. That's fine. If people are okay with owning cards that have been altered, and your justification for altering cards is some people want altered cards, then you have no reason not to say this card has been altered. So in Pokemon,
wait. I just got to correct the one line.
Okay.
I don't want to justify to say, you said justification is some people want to own altered cards. No. Some people want to own the best condition card available.
And okay if that is because it's altered, yeah.
Yeah, and when you said that, and I can correct this for anybody who's actually interested, but I think I misstated. So I'm going to talk about the Mickey Mantle card again. I do believe he was not aware it was altered. And he found out later it was altered, but he was very happy still to own it. Okay. So what I want to say is, you're going to have to talk as you continue your discussion about, do you really need to know it's altered? If It's, wait a minute, I don't tell you I polished my shoes. They're just beautiful and they're my shoes. So I just want to make sure you think it's critically important that it's every card that's been, altered has a way of saying altered. I mean, that's what you're talking about.
Well, I suppose it depends on what exactly you're talking about when you're saying altered, because when you're using the thing of, oh, I polished my shoes, to me that is in line with, but a lot of times before people submit cards to be graded, they'll give them like a wipe down with a microfiber cloth, remove any fingerprints, anything like that. When I'm thinking of things being altered, I'm thinking more of when people will put ink on the backs, like if a card has a little white spot on the back border, they'll color it in blue. That's what I'm more thinking of for altering. And for when I think of that, that's a very big change to the card, which on the surface can look like it's improving the condition of the card. To me, it falls into, it's almost the difference between if you're selling a car, washing the outside of it, or rolling back the odometer. I think that one of them is something that everyone's going to do, which is trying to wipe down the card, make sure there's no fingerprints on it, make sure it's clean. And then one of them, I think, is fundamentally changing something about the card, which is, rolling back the odometer on the car, inking the card in sports cards, trimming the edges to make them sharp, that kind of thing. I think that's the kind of thing that if you're doing that and you're not trying to scam someone, you should be open and honest about it. And any grading company who gets the idea that they've been submitted a card that's had one of these changes should be putting it on the label saying this card has been altered in this way. Like, we're bringing in outside materials, especially with inking in Pokemon. Inking is one of the biggest ways that people will alter to improve cards. And it is basically, to me, it's the difference between cleaning a card. I don't think cleaning a card is altering it in any way. It's removing fingerprints, it's removing dust. That I would not count as altering a card.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, this video should be about people submitting their comments. This is the biggest topic in the hobby right now. So you guys have got to have opinions. I'm completely ecstatic with all of you saying, no card should ever be altered. I like to hear your opinions because I don't have one. I just hear people's views and like to look at and expound on both sides. I never knew until I saw about 2 weeks ago that there was even such a thing as a label saying the word altered from a grading card company. And I think it was PSA that I saw that, I saw a label that said altered, and I called a friend and I said, what does altered mean? And they said probably means that there was some ink, like Dan suggested, put on maybe to re-blue up the backside or something like that. So
yeah, and I think the PSA will only grade those if you submit it to PSA saying, this is an altered card, it has been inked, I want the altered label. If you just submit a card and say, can you grade this, and they find out during their grading that it's been inked and wasn't declared, they won't just automatically put it in a holder saying, this was altered. They will send it back no grade.
Okay. And again, all of this, as you can widely imagine, is not my strength. I have never graded anything. I've never sent a card to be graded. I have had some cards that have been recently acquired that have been graded due to their rarity. And due to circumstances like when they were cut off the uncut sheets and stuff, and they were sent in to be not only authenticated, but also condition graded at the same time. So, and I really realize as I say that, I never did speak in this video, don't intend to speak about specifically the authentication piece. I had to grade the pre-release Raichus for everyone to believe that they actually did indeed exist. So I didn't talk about the very rare cases, and maybe I do address it. I don't remember, but it is the one-offs are a little different. But as far as altering, not altering, and what that consists of, I think Dan brings up some great points. Cleaning. When there was some troll in the hobby who decided to put me next to some other people, and he still does it in his videos all the time because he has nothing better to do, and suggested that I was involved in doing immoral and unethical and illegal activities. I decided to watch a couple of his videos, and he had cited some situations where I saw someone using like an eraser or something. So, that makes me bring up, well, like if you could erase a mark from a card, is that okay or not okay? Like it doesn't fall under the altering side, or does it? And I'm not suggesting it, folks. I don't do it. I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm asking questions. It could be termed a term of cleaning, like Dan said, but maybe Dan's cleaning only extends to a microcloth or a microfiber cloth. So again, I'll let Dan finish on this topic, but let's hear your thoughts. I want to hear if this is, are you guys open-minded, or you're like, nope, nothing should be touched, nothing should be altered, there shouldn't even be such a category. Everything with its, even if there's a technology to fix it, you should never fix those cards. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Dan, final comments on this topic.
Well, I think when you're talking about dirt and stuff on cards and people cleaning the dirt off cards, however it is, I do still think that counts as cleaning the card, because it's removing something that has been put on the card later. It's trying to get the card back to its original condition, whereas adding the ink or trimming it down is fundamentally changing the original condition of the card or the original properties of the card. When you're adding something rather than taking it away, I think that's where the big thing comes in. But if you remove dirt from a card, it's probably going to leave stains and stuff anyway that people will notice. But I just think if you want altered cards in your collection, fine. Or if you're okay with it, fine. I'm not going to tell you shouldn't have those. But I think anyone who's altering cards themselves, or who's especially selling altered cards, needs to be 100% open about it. Because I've seen a lot of people buy a card, submit it to be graded, get it back. We can't grade this, it's been altered, it's got ink on the back. And the inking of the backs, the way people can do it is very, very subtle. That's one thing where the average person looking at it wouldn't know about it. You would have to really, really look at it. So just it all comes down to what is a big thing throughout all of collecting is openness and honesty is going to go far. And the people if people aren't being honest with you, they're trying to scam someone. If someone is selling altered cards without saying that they're altered, they're trying to scam someone. Even if it's not necessarily you, even if you don't care about the altered nature of the cards, someone somewhere down the line, they're okay with ripping off.
Yeah, I hear you. It just is everything. I try to pride myself on my ability to see the thinking around things. And so I'm going to insert a thought here before I kind of finish up on the last topic. So I'm going to say, wouldn't we all love for grading card companies to be the be-all, end-all of every question of legitimacy and condition we have in the hobby? Of course we would. But unfortunately, that is currently not the case, and in reality may never be the case. So Dan does that whole thing, that whole diatribe about authenticity and not getting over on someone. And I'm thinking, what if there was a $300 Charizard and it was, I'm completely making this up, folks, for argument's sake, like a debate on a stage, so we have a cordial and kind back and forth conversation. Let's say it's a textured Charizard card. And if it was put in today, it would be an 8 or a 9. And somebody has a way to fix the little nick. Let's say it's not on the back, it's on the front somewhere. They have something they can do. It's an authentic card, not trimmed, not nothing. So they fix it. Something on the front. They have a little tool, or I don't know what it would be. I have no idea. And now they send it in to a card company, grading card company, and it comes back a 10. I buy it and I stick it in my collection. That card is a real card. It is not trimmed. It is somebody did a little something on the front, so it moved from a 9 to a 10. And it got in a holder, and the grading card company said it was a 10, and I'm happy to have it. I didn't need to know the whole story behind it. If it got in that holder and it's a 10 and it legitimately is one. So Dan would say you cannot do that. That's his opinion. I'm just talking about as a buyer. I never knew what happened. I didn't know what hit me. And as long as it met my two criteria of not altered, not smaller in size and not a fake card or proxy card, I'm happy to own a 10 and a slab from CGC, PSA, whatever. Dan, what is wrong with that from my debating standpoint?
From the debating standpoint is the person that slab got sold to might not have been okay with it. You know, you get the slab, it meets your criteria. Someone might have bought that card and someone might not want altered cards in their collection and they're unknowingly buying something. That's why I think it should be.
But wait, it's not essentially at the point in time that it comes to me, one could argue it's no longer altered. Like the blue on the back, you can see it. It's visible. It's whatever. They've just essentially cleaned it to the way that you said. They've cleaned it. They haven't, whatever. Why would, tell me. And by the way, let me make your argument. I'm going to make Dan's argument now. And we're not doing comments from this video. We're not doing comments from the last video. We're doing the next video. But there was a great comment, so kind of him to take the time to even put a comment out there, from Rusty on the fact that he acquired my pre-release Raichu card, one of the two. You guys know that by now. So he said, because I was talking about the fact that I felt queasy for a moment when he said, gosh, I'm so happy I could get the 5.5 and not the 8 one because it's the one with all the story behind it, the lore. For Rusty, the story behind that card was as important, if not more important, than the specific grade on the card. So Rusty, despite a very tiny crease on it, saying, I don't even care. I want to know exactly where that card came from. I want to know where it was. I love the story behind it, the lore. That's kind of what Dan is saying. I want to know the entirety of that card. If there's anything, even a smidge out of the normal processing to get it graded as a whatever the number is. And that makes complete sense, Dan. Would you kind of say that's kind of what you're saying?
Kind of, but I think it's more just, Rusty talked about how he wanted that card in his collection because he wanted the one that came from Mike Boozer. So let's say we know that you wanted the higher grade one, you wanted the 8. If you just had them both graded, if CGC hadn't done that write-up on it, would it have been okay for you? And let's say the Mike Boozer one came out as a higher grade, and then the second one came out as a lower grade. Is it okay for you to tell Rusty that the lower grade one is the Mike Boozer one? Because if once Rusty gets it in his collection, if he thinks that he's got the Mike Boozer one, does it actually matter? Yes, of course it does. Because he's bought something where he's buying something believing it to be something else. I think that's a more closer analogy to this altered thing is, what if you told Rusty he was getting the one he wanted, but he was actually getting the other one? I mean, obviously we know that's not the case, but
yes, and come on, there's no articulation. What I'm saying is, when you're not saying something deliberately or deliberately answering a question inaccurately is not the same as not saying something at all, is all I'm saying. But again, I want to stop only because.
But David, I think because grading card companies can do this thing where they put altered on the label, I think the fact that exists with some companies, they can mark a card as altered. I think if they then grade an altered card and don't mark it as altered, I think that's lying, or at least lying by omission, because the people are expecting altered cards to be marked as altered, and they expect to, if they're buying a card that's not marked as altered, to be buying an unaltered card.
Yeah, the reason I was saying I want to stop is because I agree with everything you're saying. I don't disagree at all. I don't have, I reserve the right to form my own opinion on this because I haven't heard enough information from everyone to sway me in one direction yet. And obviously,
I just think it's important that both sides of the argument get put across.
Correct. Because there's no A or B, folks. When you go to law school, which I did years ago, you understand the first thing you say is they go, well, your answer is right or wrong. And they go, of course. And they go, no, it's not. It's right, but then this caveat, it's wrong with this. And you move from A and B to all the way through to Z. So There's all these different categories we could get into in trying to analyze this. I just want to finish by saying I am not suggesting go alter and hide your cards. I just wanted to open a dialogue about this since we're under the concept of grading, and I wanted to see if you guys could weigh in after Dan and I had a bit of a dialogue so I could hear your thoughts. That was most important. All right. Before I do the last category in this, we did collectors and sellers. The last category is going to be investors. I'm going to say ba ba da ba, and then somebody comes in behind me, and you can see him. There's no one behind me unless it's Pikachu. I'm not turning around because if I do, you can see the bald spot on the back of my head. I'm so embarrassed. I'm not accepted at well. I still want to spend the $10,000 to do hair transplants. Can you guys comment and tell me if I should do it? You know what? Screw it. I'm going to show you it because I haven't decided. I want to do it. I'm vain, and nobody in my family says I should do it. Okay, Dan, can you see the bald spot? Yes or no? Just a minute. I'm rolling.
Yes, I can. I can see it.
You don't have to say like so brave, like yes. You could say kind of, David. It's sort of in there. Okay.
Okay, it's sort of in there.
Okay, thanks, buddy. So, guys, should I spend 10 grand and put some hair transplant in the ripe old age of 62? Let me know. All right, so giveaway today. The giveaway today. It's here. It's time. Thanks for watching to this point, or just finding it in the video somewhere randomly as you were searching. I want you to reach out to me in my Instagram DM, okay? Because I'm making a ton of new friends, tons of new subscribers. I'm having a blast. You guys are great. I want you to answer 2 questions. The first one is, do you grade your cards? All I need is a yes or no. Do you grade your cards? Yes or no? And which company do you use if you grade, primarily? Or which company do you think you'd use if you don't? So, hey, I don't grade right now, but based on everything I've heard, blah, blah, blah. Excuse me, or based on the cards I have, whatever, I'd probably use this company. That's it. Do you grade, and which company do you grade with, or which would you use if you actually thought you might grade someday? Throw it out to me. Leave a comment on the video. You'll be entered. And don't forget, if you share this video, or in addition to what I just said, if you share this video or you share any of my Instagram posts, there's a ton of them out there now, you get an extra entry into the week's drawing. So thank you for listening. I hope one of you guys have success. Dan, are we good from that before I continue?
Yep, you continue.
All right, last category, investors. You're an investor in single cards of Pokemon. Should you grade your cards at all? And I'm going to make this fairly simple for you guys. I'm going to say, if you're a short-term investor, yes, you should grade your cards. And if you're a long-term investor, you should not grade your cards. Why? For all the reasons I just stated above. So, if you're long-term, no. I hold all the cards, no pun intended. I hold all the cards by not have graded my cards. Because as an investor, even though I'm really a collector, if I turn myself into an investor, I'm going to have the greatest available technology and the greatest available story to tell as this industry continues to move very quickly from chaos to actual, more consistency, more objectivity rather than subjectivity. But that's over the longer term. And judging from my career from my lifespan and my career in the financial markets, I think you're looking at no more than about 5 years at the longest, possibly even shorter. But I'm going to call 5 to 10 years longer term. If you are an investor now looking to buy and sell or rebuy, resell, all of those things, you kind of have to, again, to get that thing out, to get those cards out to market, you basically sort of have no choice but to grade now. Obviously, you want to be careful with it and you want to keep in mind everything we said throughout the whole video. But I do think on the shorter term, you just don't have a choice because, if investing means you look to flip at some point. And if you're going to flip, that means selling, and selling means grading, and grading means confidence to the buyers. So you really just don't have a lot of choice. Dan, that's a very brief point because it's a summary of the other categories. Do you have a thought on that? Investors, short or long term?
I mean, I definitely agree, I think, on that one. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say on that one. I think you did cover that one quite well. I think it makes sense what you said.
Okay. So I have a final thought here about grading. And I sort of said in the beginning, we weren't going to go down in the company level. But I will say, just generally speaking, there are definitely differences between the three major grading card companies and other people. And I'm only talking on the US side. Gosh, I know that there's grading card companies that are more prevalent, foreign speaking as well. So it isn't fair for me to say the three major. I'm talking about PSA, CGC, and Beckett, but you guys know there's other ones coming. So make sure if you're going to grade, you do your due diligence to understand the differences between all of these companies. Generally, first, you need to examine what each company will or will not grade. Some grade sealed, some don't. Some grade sealed packs, some don't. Some grade sealed cello, some don't. Some grade test prints, some don't. You have to look at their available technology for authenticating more difficult or potentially questionable items, kind of like I had to do for the test prints that I was doing or the pre-release Raichus. You have to look at the costs of grading, including submission and ending values, turnaround times if you have any urgency received a card to get your cards back, estimated grades, especially if they're higher. You might think some companies are more likely to offer certain grades better than others. I don't know that. And desired selling prices, as certain companies and their reputations, so certain grades from them tend to hold their value better than others. And Dan, just because I don't know this answer, maybe you could help, as I mentioned, the submission and ending values as far as the costs of grading. So I know that there's you pay a price to grade cards per card. And I also know that PSA has an ending value, like they grade it. And I guess tell me if I'm correct, if it grades a certain level and they can estimate a value based on that grade, then you're going to pay some additional monies based on what that card would sell for.
Yes, so PSA, when you're submitting to PSA, it will have different categories of how much you pay, and that category will be based on the value of the card. You know, there's I think like sub $100, $100 to $500, $500 $1,000 values of the card keep going up, and you pay more per category. And with PSA, it's, let's say you grade a card where the value of the card as it sits raw is $200, and if it gets an 8 or a 9, it's going to be $300, $400. But if it gets a 10, it's going to be $800. If you submit it and you pay in the category of the $100 to $500, if it then comes back a 10, they now base it on the current market value, and they say, okay, well, this card is now an $800 card because it's a 10. So before you get your card back, you have to pay the difference in the grading cost between the 1 to 500 category and the 5 to 1,000 category. You have to just pay the difference between what you would have paid if you were grading it as an $800 card.
Okay.
I'm almost certain CGC doesn't do that. I don't believe Beckett does either.
Okay. All right. So again, just other concerns. And you wonder, I mean, I think this is the reason that we can make videos about everything. Think about the thumbnail sketches and videos. I've seen so many just looking in the last few weeks that are so absolutely misleading. And of course, they're intended to, because they're intended to get you to watch. Like, the hobby is completely falling apart. The investments in Pokemon are horrible. And then you open up the video and the person is saying, okay, I'm just telling you what everybody's saying. Now I'm going to tell you why that's not true. So there isn't a topic within grading that we couldn't turn into something controversial. I could sit here and articulate that doesn't PSA have a wonderful incentive to give you better grades because they're going to reap more dollars? You know, how do we know that employees haven't been told, hey, if it's between a 9 and a 10 and you can't tell, give it a 10, because it'll give us more money if it increases the value of the card from the grading submission costs after fact, and it will give us a better reputation as, oh, people are, they give higher grades, which clearly isn't the case, because you'd look at it and say it's a 9 in the case, and so it shouldn't have been given a 10. But I'm talking about stuff that's right on the edge. So we can make anything controversial. This video was not about that. This video was about, is there enough controversy out there that you should sway away from grading completely? Is it manageable controversy, or is it just exaggerated and it shouldn't mean a hill of beans in the way you make a decision? And is there a way to decide right off the top, maybe even categorically looking at who you would place yourself into as, or how you would define yourself from a category standpoint, to say, hey, I don't have to deal with any of this because I'm not going to grade, or I'm just in this category and I have to grade, et cetera. Helping you guys kind of navigate the variety of different options in all of this. That's it from my end. I do want to say, I hope you gained just a bit of knowledge today, perspective, whatever Dan and I can offer you guys. And I hope it benefits you in your hobby experience in some fashion going forward. I'm going to, well, let me close out this, then Dan, I'll let you in. So I will always say to you guys, and I always do, as I said this earlier in the video, so I'm sorry to be repetitive. Like it or don't like it, I like listening to Alex and Nostalgia Anonymous. He's like, I am who I am, guys. I'm not going to sway away because from the hate. I'm not going to do whatever. It's going to be me. I don't like the hate. I don't like any of it. It's not me. We did 2 tough videos, or 3 on the pre-release Raichu grading and the E4 situation. And after that, we're back to what we do. We don't over dramatize for views. And we tell it like it is in hopes that this podcast will reach more people from an informational standpoint and a benefit standpoint. But I am who I am, and I will never change that. You guys can always reach out to me. Please do. It's at dperson, DPERSIN1 on Instagram. Any questions, concerns, not behind paywalls. I will get to you, I promise. It is what it is. Please leave your comments on the video. Love to have a dialogue on this. If we have enough questions, interest, feedback, comments, what Dan and I plan to do is follow this up with an additional video where we actually bring on someone who we would call more of a grading card expert, someone who's done a lot more grading and maybe knows more of the actual in-the-weed stories, nuances, et cetera, and see how they feel about the points that I've made today, Dan's interjected on today. So that's the plan. If you guys show interest, if you're like, hey, great, we're done, we've seen enough, bye-bye, that's great too. We won't bother you again. You guys are busy. You don't need Dan and I. You've got families, kids, dogs, jobs, sports fanaticism. You got all kinds of stuff. And lastly, I'll say, please, if you like the video, share the video with your hobby friends so they can watch and hopefully provide their input and get benefit on their side as well, especially with how many new people, both kids and adults, are entering the hobby these days.
All right. There's one topic of grading that I do want to speak about just for a couple of minutes.
Yes.
There's been a lot of talk of are there more mistakes being made by grading companies lately? I see that a lot. It's, we're seeing every week there's been some problem with one of the grading companies. And, we talked about these videos get over-dramatized, but there are obviously real things that do happen with these grading companies. There are real issues. There are only more problems with grading companies because they're grading more cards. Like, are we seeing more PSA screw-ups now than we were 10 years ago? Yes, because they're grading 10 times as many cards. No company is perfect. Any company that makes a product, any company that provides a service are not going to get it 100% correct. It's just, if you do something 10 times, maybe you screw up once. But then if you do it 10,000 times, you're going to see more screw-ups. But hey, maybe the percentage of screw-ups got lower, but we're seeing way more. And on that, I want to talk about quality control for a moment, because this isn't even just about grading. I see people talk about quality control in Pokemon as a whole, when we're talking about these error cards and stuff, miscuts, things that come out. The biggest thing people always say is, where was quality control? So I want to just say about quality control, because people in the hobby need to understand this. People who collect stuff need to understand this. Number one, quality control does not check every product that comes out of a company. It is not possible for an independent quality control to check every single card. Every single card that's printed by Pokemon, every single thing that's graded, it will go through a process. There will be, there will be the general process of grading, then quality control within the process, but it's not then possible for another quality control person to go and look at it, especially as more stuff gets automated. The same with printing Pokemon cards. There is not one person looking at every single card that comes off the printer because it's just not possible. Number two, quality control, especially when a product is being made. I guess this bit is maybe more for the printing of Pokemon cards than grading this bit. There is a margin of allowable error for quality control. If quality control opens up, they've done a print run of 100,000 boxes of Pokemon, and quality control says, okay, we're going to open these 10 cases. If there are 5 miscut cards in those 10 cases that they open, they're not scrapping the print run. There is a percentage of allowable error that quality control has when making products. And I think people just need to get that. Pokemon printed... I'm just going to go into printing of cards now, because this is just a gripe that I have with people who talk about quality control. Pokemon printed, I think they said 9 billion cards last year. Something like that, 9 billion. If they have a 0.01 percentage of error, that's it. And that's saying if their cards are 99.99% perfect, that means there are 900,000 error cards going out in a year. And 99.99 is a ridiculously high percentage to think of that a company could have. I need people to understand that quality control, that not everything is going to be solved by just saying, oh, they need more quality control, because companies do have quality control. There is just no company is ever going to be 100% perfect. And if you're seeing more errors and stuff, more screw-ups going through grading card companies, and I'm not pointing at one specific company, I'm talking about this as an industry as a whole. The reason there are more things happening is because more cards are being graded. If you try to boil down the percentages of how many screw-ups there are, the percentages are going to be similar. I just needed to get that off my chest because it just irritates the hell out of me when people talk about cards like that.
Well, and Dan, it points to a couple of other things, right? I mean, one thing it points to is, even machines make mistakes. They're still programmed by people, and they still break down. And so even as you said that, I haven't had a chance to visit the tag facility. I was invited once, but I just remember they were talking about how they weren't ready to send cards out formally graded because they needed quality to control to step in at the end of all of the higher value cards, whatever, any cards, and just check to make sure that they were actually not too critical in their grading and not too, specific and not giving cards that really should give a 10, but they're getting an 8 because they found 62 things on them. So, except they're not visible things because it's a machine. So even machines make mistakes. Again, people that program machines make mistakes. You have grading card companies are all at this point subjective. Billy had a great night last night and is the happiest guy. It's flying out 9s and 10s. And Jimmy broke up with his girlfriend and is sitting there trying to, get a paycheck. And he's given 7s and 8s for the same cards. That happens. You also have, you could take any profession, Dan. You have great nurses and nurses that go out and kill people. So, you have saboteurs. What I'm saying is all of this, the only thing I was trying to say is earlier, notwithstanding you made a great point, we can't just say with grading card companies, we can say with miscuts on the Pokemon, potentially the more cards, a yes. With grading card companies, the more cards, the more chances that people have cards coming through their hand. The more the boss says, you don't get to grade 1,000 cards today. To keep your job, you got to grade 2,000 cards, right? Because there's more coming through and there's not more employees, whatever. So they either hire somebody who's less experienced or they tell you to work harder and faster for the same money, and you're just throwing them down and moving on. You didn't spend 20 seconds on a card anymore to evaluate. You're spending 10. So your points are well taken, but they just highlight even more what I said as far as my concerns over grading. And if you are able to find yourself a point to fall into one of the categories where I suggest you don't have to, I think you should not.
Yeah, I mean, that's, like I say, it was another point I wanted to get out there, and like I said, my rant on quality control, I guess, fell more into the printing cards rather than the grading cards, but it was just something that's been on my mind a lot.
Well,
Are we close to the end?
We're done, but this is fantastic. You've just introduced a new segment. Our viewers right now are so excited. Right now, I just saw Stephen Kassoon, Maddie from the UK. I think, Dan from Codes, Cards, Pros, and Dan at Catch 'em All. They all jumped 3/4 of the way to the moon because it looks like we have a new segment called Dan's Rant coming. And maybe a monthly feature, but when you got to get stuff off your chest, could be the E4 stuff, could be the quality control, whatever it is. We're going to start doing Dan's Rant. Make sure your face is as red as mine. I'm going to shut up by saying, since we're done, I want to say to you guys, thanks for watching. From the bottom of my heart, we truly appreciate each and every one of you. We wouldn't be here without you. You've helped us double our numbers. We want to double them again. You guys are coming to my Instagram, looking at my posts. I've been able to increase by about 1,500 followers in the last, 2 months. So it's really gelling, and we love doing it because we're just helping you guys enjoy the hobby and giving you whatever wisdom and whatever kookiness I can give you and whatever wisdom Dan can give you at the same time. So thank you for taking the time.
And I know we didn't have a comment section this week, so we're going to address this more next week. A couple of people pointed out to me the distributor promos that we talked about last week from the Diamond and Pearl set. PSA have graded some of them. They've at least graded some Turtwigs. I know Matty reached out and said that his Turtwig is graded, and someone else mentioned to me that they have a Turtwig. Theirs isn't graded, but they know there are some on the Pop Report. We'll go into that a bit more next week. Just because I said last week I didn't think PSA had graded any, I wanted to clarify that I have seen the comments. I know that what I'd said was incorrect, and we'll go into that in more detail next week. But just clearing it up on this one so there's not another week of people thinking I hadn't seen those comments. All right, I think that's going to be it for us for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Hopefully you leave a lot of interesting comments.
Hopefully you enjoyed. Wait, you got to say, hopefully you enjoyed this first ever special edition of Pokemon Coffee Talks.
Yeah. Which, retroactively, about 4 of the previous episodes definitely could have been special editions. Like that, the pre-release Raichu one could have been a special edition if we thought of it, but you wanted to call this one a special edition to see what happens to people listening to it. Anyway, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the first special edition of Coffee Talks, and hopefully we will be able to get someone on who does a lot of grading, deals with grading companies a lot, and we can go into this a little more in depth with them in the future. But for now, thanks again to you all for listening, watching. As I keep forgetting to say every week, thank you to More Than Never for allowing us to use their music within these podcasts. I should be shouting them out every week. I know they're in the end screen. Laura does shout them out, but definitely go and check them out on Spotify. They're good people. All their links are in our description, as well as all of mine and Dave's stuff. So that's it. Are we good, David? Are we good to say see you next week to everyone?
We're good.
All right, see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Coffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, featuring music by More Than Never and artwork by Laura Norton. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to have a